I had a teammate on my team that, he was the best from his country, and the country is very notable, and the number one rival to the United States. And so he was very, very good. And I remember saying, I'm going to take his soul every single day. I'm going to take it. And that sounds twisted, right?
Yeah, it does.
But I created the necessity, and I know that I brought out the best in him and he brought out the best in me. He didn't need to know about it. We're still the best of friends, and
he didn't need to know about it, that I was going to take his soul. It was
inside me. It was right. My world in here.
Yeah, I got you.
And you definitely didn't need to know that.
I'm Billy Ryan, and this is the No One Is Watching podcast, where we explore high-performing teams, individuals, and leaders, and dig deep to find out what makes them tick. This show highlights the DNA shared by elite performers, the process by which they leverage that talent, and ultimately helps you apply those lessons to your own life, business, or team. So I think part of what makes your story so interesting, at least to me, is your childhood and how you explain how you were raised and your parents, and particularly when you contrast that with the path that you took and the things you achieved. Can you tell me a little bit about that, sort of what life was like as a kid?
Yeah. For me, my parents were kind of like outlier type personalities. So for us, there was, we were very unconventional to begin with. They had come from the East Coast and the only people from the family to move out to the West Coast and move to Oregon. So I grew up, I think the biggest gift my parents gave me was, the space just to be myself. So we didn't really grow up with any sort of expectations as far as I knew. And so my dad was always interested in self-development. So for me at a young age, it was this idea of, having a dream, going after something. I didn't really have one until I got to the age of 14. And when I was 14, it's kind of like, maybe this is fairly common, but it was just like, okay, let's go. Let's choose. We got to make a choice. So took all the stuff that my dad had been kind of putting in front of me, and wanted to put it into practice. And so I decided.
What kind of stuff was your dad into? What kind of stuff did you absorb?
Stuff like Dale Carnegie, maybe Napoleon Hill, some of these people that were into basically being able to visualize a future or see a future. And how do you, kind of like the phrase behind me, unlimit your potential. It's just something that, it was a phrase that kind of popped into my head when I think I was 6 years old. It was a sort of curiosity of, human potential. I think I was a bit rebellious to school. I always kind of felt like school wasn't really capturing my imagination and, in a way, maybe limiting me or forcing me to be something that I wasn't, because I wasn't getting good grades, that's for sure. So, but I knew that I was curious. I knew that I was kind of like this learner,
Mm-hmm.
And so he would have different books, all kinds of different books on just human development and, being able to create a reality that doesn't exist yet.
And so it sounds like you were intellectually curious as a kid, even if you weren't the best student.
Oh yeah. If I had fish, I would, I'd have I'd build graphs and, spreadsheets of like all of the things that go into raising the, aquarium fish. So I was a student. I just didn't want to study what the teacher was forcing me to study.
Got it. Pick your own subject matter.
Yeah. And then I was obsessed by whatever that was,
Okay.
So, but it had to be up to me. That was the thing. And our parents had allowed us that space to do that, and, they started with this really great, and I've tried to do that as a parent as well, this really great sort of starting point, which was they when we were adults said that, we really started out with this idea that you were here to teach us, not the other way around. So they were always curious of like, where did we want to go? What were we into? And so that kind of flips things around rather than them feeling like they have to teach us. We were there to teach
Interesting.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without us really knowing, it's not like they made that. We found that out as adults. So,
Got it.
so yeah, I started focusing. 14 was like, hey, let's pick a dream. Let's pick something to go after. And I had always been fascinated about the Olympics. Old enough to have seen the Miracle on Ice when I was really little, but it was magical. And I
Yeah.
remember it was before I really knew what the Olympics were. But when they ended, I was like, what? The end? There can't be an end to it. And I'd start crying, you know? So there was definitely this connection. And then that age of 14, I was like, okay, let's go after the Olympics.
I'm curious, did you watch other sports, or was it the Olympics specifically that just grabbed you for some reason?
Yeah, I think it was, I later went to the Olympics as a spectator. And if anyone has a chance to go to the Olympics, I really, really encourage it, because the Olympics, interesting enough, is more of a celebration of humanity than it is about sports. It just happens to be about sports, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really all these different countries come together and just enjoy being together as
Yeah.
one. And I think that's part of it, was there's this feeling to it. It's
Yeah.
the ultimate experience of community on for the whole planet.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
so yeah, I started with that idea, and the Olympics came around, and so I started studying the Olympics to make a choice on, okay, I want to go to the Olympics. How are we going to do this?
And
And
this is again like this is like you want to go to the Olympics. It's not like I want to go be a swimmer or throw the javelin. Is I just want to go to the Olympics, and I don't know how I'm going to do that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like that's
Yeah,
the fascinating part for me. Is
it's
like it's
weird.
like I just want to. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So yeah, because people will ask me, after I chose my sport, I ended up choosing swimming. And so now that I am, my career's in the rearview mirror, they're like, oh, well, you must be a fish out of water. And I'm like, yeah, no, not really. I mean, I just chose swimming.
Uh huh. Uh
That was the
huh.
vehicle.
Yeah, that's wild, man.
Yeah. And it is kind of like the ultimate experiment, because it's not like anyone ever spotted me in water and said, wow, look at this kid. He moves through water. Kind of like, someone throwing a
Yeah,
ball. This kid is really good at this.
yeah.
Yes.
Not some talent
No,
scout that just happened to stumble upon you somewhere. Yeah.
there was
So okay, so
no
you
one.
say I'm going to the Olympics,
Yeah.
and then and then what happens?
So I started studying it. Like I said, I was a good student, outside of school. And so I started studying it, and kind of, probably, I was really into spreadsheets. So all the different sports. And I came from a small town, and so I had to choose a sport I could actually have access to. And timing, my parents also taught me, instilled some sense of like timing to everything, connection to everything. And
Okay.
this girl, she won a gold medal. And I've never really heard anyone ask this question since, but they asked it to her. And they said, if someone wants to go do what you just did, what would you recommend? And so perfect timing. And that was my answer. Whatever she said, I'm going to go do that. And she said, well, I came through a YMCA program. So, back then it was the Yellow Pages. So go look up the Y, and went down to the Y and walked up to the head coach and said, I want to go to the Olympics. And I'm a freshman in high school. So that's kind of, odd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
clear on such a big goal. And he smiled, and then he said, okay, well, do you know how to swim? And I said, no. And he started laughing. And so that was the beginning of the journey. He was great, though. He was a good guy. And he put me with the little kids, little 10-year-olds. So
Uh
second
huh.
graders. And
So could you swim at all? Like, Were
No,
you like sink like a stone if you jumped in the pool?
yeah, my first race was down and back, and I only made it down, and
Okay.
I I drank half the pool on the way down.
Okay.
That's it. That's where I started. I was more
Okay.
of a rock in the
Wow.
water than I was
Okay.
a swimmer. But I was curious, and
Hmm.
the reason why I always kind of want to fit that into the story is that I was failing all the time, but I didn't see it as failure because I didn't have a history. So
Right.
what seemed like this huge disadvantage became a massive advantage because for me it was all about learning.
Hmm.
And so, it was this fascination of like, how do I do this? And, so I relate to people like, Kobe Bryant, you know, he really came from the student aspect of, can I go do that? And it was this curiosity. And then it
Hmm.
was a process of like going and actually meeting with the greats to take notes and find out what worked for them, and cross reference everything. And that was how I was.
I think
And
that's a
so,
fascinating thing. I just want to
yeah,
pause on that because I think that's a fascinating perspective on things because you didn't view it as failure, uh, seemingly because one, you were viewing it essentially as an experiment, right? Can I do this? I clearly
yeah,
can't do it right now, but what do I need to do to be able to do it? And so there's zero ego involved either because it's not like you've been swimming for 10 years and then you decide, hey, I want to go to the Olympics, and your
yeah,
pride gets hurt when you realize you're not good enough. So I think there's a
right,
lot to draw from that, just sort of humbling yourself and realizing. You think of somebody making a career change, or Michael Jordan when he walked away from basketball, right? And, greatest player on the planet. I'm going to go struggle in double A baseball, just to see if I
yeah,
can do it, to prove it to myself, right? Like
yeah,
there's a lot that's hard to do because most people, don't make those sort of hard transitions necessarily in their life. But
yeah.
I think you just kind of turn it into a superpower to your point.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I just see it as this sort of process of curiosity. And I didn't have a room full of trophies, didn't have any ribbons, nothing, no clippings. And for me, it was just this, hey, let's go learn about this thing and let's see how far we can take it. And I believed that it was possible to begin with. I will say that, so I came from this space, and my parents weren't athletes. So I was this freak that, in my family, because there was nothing that was suggested from my environment. My dad built classical guitars, and my mom was an author. So they were artistic people. And so for the Olympics, it was kind of like they treated it as a hobby, and they
Mm-hmm.
said, okay, that's fine. We'll sign the release forms or whatever, but you got to find your way to practices. You got to pay for your dues. You got to get yourself to the competitions. And for me, I'm not saying that works for probably a lot of other people, but for me, it was perfect because I was self motivated. It was all intrinsic, right, rather than
Yeah.
extrinsic.
Yeah.
And it was a buy-in, so that every time I got on my bike and I rode 10 miles to get to workout, you bet I'm going to make the most of that workout. And then on the
Sure.
way to the workout, I'm going to be doing, visualization and, listening to these self-help, audio, in my headphones.
Yep.
I'm going to maximize this thing all the time, taking the city bus to get down there, when I couldn't ride the bike or whatever it took. I was going to get there. And every time I had to go through all that to get there, it made me more and more committed to this thing. And I love that. I love that part. And when I'd get there, the friends on my team, I felt, this became my biggest pet peeve was, parent coaches, that were living vicariously through their kids, and the kids didn't, my buddies didn't even want to be there. I
Uh-huh.
was like, man, I just rode 10 miles to get here, and you don't, and they're dropping you off and you're resisting it. You don't even want to be here. You're tortured by this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
I equate that to like it's different circumstances, but that's pervasive in probably all youth sports now, but it's definitely pervasive in baseball. And you see these kids that, do I have to go out and practice? It's hot outside. And then I would go down to like the Dominican, right? And a lot of that is sort of driven by economic opportunity and sort of options that they have or don't have. But those kids down there, that's all they want to do. They're out there with no shoes and a cardboard box as a glove, right? That's all, and you have to drag them off the field to get them off. And so, just that, getting back to sort of the intrinsic motivation, and it was your path that you chose, right? It was not mom or dad saying, "Hey, you need to play a sport, or you need to have a hobby, or you need to stay in shape." It was like, this is my path. This is what I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was no pressure at all. If anything, if my dad ever started talking about my times, or they could never, you go and ask them what my time was or any stats, they still couldn't tell you. Right.
Yeah.
They had no
And
clue.
what was the first time they saw you swim? Or race, I should say.
They went to the big ones. They went to
Okay.
the like nationals and Olympic trials. They went to those. Those were big moments. Those were family moments.
Sure, yeah. But that's crazy, because you think about, I mean, some parents are at every practice, every private session, the whole deal. And you're right, they live vicariously through it. I'm not judging it. Like, they're trying to give their kids opportunity, but I heard I had somebody on, Jeff Francoeur on our last episode, and he shared a conversation he had with John Smoltz where they were talking about youth sports. And he said, if your kid has more passion, or if the parent has more passion about the endeavor than the kid does, it's just not going to work, because eventually you'll get to 14 and you'll say, I don't want to be here. Right. Seth wants to be here because he chose this path, but this path was sort of chosen for me. So
yeah,
I'm gonna go do something else.
Yeah, I used to say this jokingly, but I'll say it even more serious as I go along, is that to get to be the best, to go after mastery or greatness, it's a form of self-torture, and you can't do that extrinsically. There's no amount of motivation. Hey, I'll give you $100 million if you do this, positive or negative of fear of life or death, to do it from the outside. There is nothing that will compete with someone that's intrinsically motivated. I will take you down. That's what makes me the killer on the field, right? Because I will do anything for this thing. You're looking around looking for your parents' approval. You see it all the time at youth sports where the parents are barking like coaches, and the kid's not even focused on the ball.
He's terrified.
Looking at their parents, like, what do I do now? They're not even looking at the coach sometimes,
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, you're like the epitome of that, of the intrinsic motivation and not having that. Again, the background fascinates me because it wasn't just, that your parents didn't put pressure on you or weren't athletically oriented. They took it seemingly took it several steps further, but it was like, hey, you're on your own. Like, we'll support you in the sense of we'll pay for this, or we'll allow it to happen, but we're not going to go out of our way to facilitate. And that certainly wouldn't work with everybody, but you were wired in a way that it probably, I don't know, maybe it drove you more than had they, attended every meet and drove you to every practice. Like, who knows how you would have responded to that? You have any thoughts?
Yeah, there were a couple of times my dad might have asked me, like, what's your time? Or he was trying to take a little bit of an interest. And I'd be like, Dad, back off.
Okay.
Yeah. But, he found a way, like, he's a very loving person, a very supportive person. So he was into the self-development part of it. So he could support the overall, like, hey, what do you want to do? What are your dreams? That's awesome. You can do it. That's all you need. You need a dad. You don't need a coach. Right. And so that's where I got my kind of my ability to be able to dream big and go after it. And, I didn't need any specifics about the sport itself. I had a coach for that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so you had that foundation, to your point, and it was, he was going to support you no matter whether it was you were going to play the violin or swim or whatever, follow your passion, support you to do it. And spot on with the intrinsic motivators. I mean, you're just not, you can see it when somebody's out there that you're not going to beat me. right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll get on the treadmill and we're gonna run, and I mean, you're either gonna beat me or
Yeah.
I'm gonna die. Like I'm gonna die, right? I'm just gonna fall
Exactly.
on the treadmill,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna quit. Um,
And you'd
so
see these
what?
guys on my team, that they they were labeled as talented, right? So humans love to project. They love to control the narrative. And so they'd say, "This is the next," right? You
Yeah,
fill
oh
in the
yeah, right.
blanks, right?
Yep.
And I remember having guys on your, because every level has that, right? The coach, even, you don't have great coaches along the way. I eventually had some really amazing coaches at the top, but there were coaches in between that had their favorites, right? I was never really a favorite. I was this sort of like comet shooting through the system, right? No
Yep.
one saw me coming. They couldn't explain how fast I was improving. They just couldn't make sense of it. So they'd have these like, their favorite this or the favorite, and I remember they'd say, "Oh, Johnny's so talented," and it was funny. I just kind of could sense. I was like, "Oh, when you get labeled talented, you get lazy."
Uh
Right?
huh.
Keep telling
Yeah.
Johnny he's talented.
Uh
Keep
huh.
feeding him, whatever that is, because
Yep.
he's getting all of his, you know, confidence from the outside world, which makes him weak. I'm
Hmm.
going to take that guy down. I'm going to have him for lunch someday. It's going to
Yeah.
take some time because I'm still
Yeah.
learning this thing. But
Yep.
eventually I just knew that, that was a weakness because I didn't want to get my reinforcement from the outside world.
Yeah. So at what point you start at 14, you start with kids that are 5 or 6 years younger than you, and you literally like learn how to swim. Um, when does it start like progressing for you? When do you start feeling like you get a sense of confidence or a feeling that I actually might have some talent in this area?
Well, for me, I don't know if I was looking even for the results. I would just say for me, the process was right from the get go. My dad, again, the self development stuff, he had this book on memory. And so in this book, and he'd kind of come to me and, point things out about things like, hey, you might read these few pages if you're interested. Never forcing me to, just saying, hey, this is on sports. And they had this, what ended up being a very well known study from Australia, and it was basketball. They were three groups of, over, I think it was a course of a few months. They were shooting free throws, and they had one group that was all they did was physical training. And then they had another group that was a control group that didn't do anything. And then they had the third group that was the mental. So they didn't even touch a basketball, but they did all the mental training. And when the results came back, the physical group had improved 24%. Control group didn't improve at all. And then the mental group didn't touch a ball at all. It improved 23%. So again, timing. A lot of this is just timing.
Hmm.
Like Kobe says, you set your course, and for him, I want to be the best that's ever played this game. He never said I am the best. He said I want to be the best, right? For
Hmm.
me, I want to get to the Olympics. Once you set the course, the GPS coordinates, like Kobe says, everything in between becomes your library, because everything is referring to you information because you're focused on this one thing, and it's helping you to learn.
Hmm.
And so immediately I was like, okay, well, we'll take the 24% and the 23%. We'll add those two. That's 47%. That's my X factor. Right.
Hmm.
And so, to me, the mental side was the foundation. A lot of times now people are talking a little bit more about it, especially with mental health. But to me, it was always like, this, are you kidding me? Like, I can train my body and I can train my mind. And then my mind, if I can really be creative, delusional, I can do all kinds of stuff because I had come from this space of being unlimited in my mind.
Hmm.
And then it became this curiosity. So I've always felt like the next level of competition is creative, right? It's not me against you. It's this sort of creativity. Like, how far can I take this? You
Yeah.
see it in basketball, like with Steph Curry. He's taking shots from half court, and now we almost assume it's going in. He's changed basketball, the way we perceive basketball. And so for me, it was always like, how far can I take this if I take off all the breaks, you know? And so,
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful concept.
and that's the fun part about it, right? To
Yeah.
me, it wasn't, it was sports, but it was more about the creation of something,
Yeah.
you know? And let's see if we can go. So that kind of has always been my space. Even when I was a little kid, it was like jumping bikes, BMX bikes of, how far can we really go on this, and encouraging others, encouraging myself. So I'd always been this kind of person of unlimited, beliefs.
Yeah,
And
the limits thing is interesting because I forget who it was, but it was I read about um the CEO of a big tech company, some
Mhm.
giant, one of the bigger ones. And I'm blanking on who it was at this point, but he said that he surmised that some large percentage, 75%, I'm getting the number wrong, but 75% of really successful startup founders were likely on the autism spectrum. And his theory behind that was kind of what you were just touching on. It's that it's so hard to build something from nothing, right? To bootstrap it, to get through, to get $1 billion valuation, to do all these things that 99% of us are going to give up or get defeated along the way because you've got your wife saying, hey, like, we can't really afford to take this risk. Or you've got your coworkers or friends or investors saying, like, there's a million reasons why this won't work and you shouldn't do it. And his whole theory was that, like, they're sort of unencumbered by that because of their condition. It's really became like a superpower for them where they just weren't. I'm not really concerned. Like, they just shut out that noise and kept going. And you see that a lot with performers. You see it a lot with athletes. The really good ones, obviously, they use it as fuel. Like, yeah, go ahead, like, bet against me, right? Like,
Mhm.
set the line and make us the underdog, please. That
Yeah,
sort of thing.
yeah,
But it's just sort of unshackling yourself from all of these limitations. It's like, it's great to say, and everybody's like, yeah, absolutely, and it's really hard to do, right? Because we're all just
yeah.
carrying all this stuff around every day.
Yeah, to me, I mean, I use a lot of like really simple references because for me, it's always been pattern recognition is what I've come to understand it. And so when you look at nature, right, it's a pretty good pattern to follow rather than fighting it. And so, mother of all invention is necessity. So let's go out and intentionally create the necessity. So that's what I would do with this focus, this obsession of, and obsession is another word for falling in love with something, right? And that's what I did, was just fall madly in love with it. I think I fell in love with the process. Again, I wasn't a swimmer. I was just like, I want to choose something and then I want to apply myself. So I was involved in mastery before I even knew what mastery was, you
So
know?
how granular would you take that at that point? Right? You're a teenager at this point, and you said you weren't really focused on results. So it's not necessarily, if I'm putting words in my mouth, your words in your mouth, correct me, but it's not that you're necessarily trying to shave off a half second here or there in your times. Was it more technique oriented or mental preparations and visuals? What was it really sort of tinkering at that granular of a level at that age?
Okay, that's a great question because it was results, but it wasn't real results. It was, I
Okay.
did this thing um, out of necessity. I did all these weird things, and now in what I do now, I realize, like, wait, this, I was doing the same thing Michael Jordan was doing, or, these different great, out of necessity, you create these things. I had a teammate on my team that, he was the best from his country, and the country is very notable, and the number one rival to the United States, and so he was very, very good. And I remember saying, I'm going to take his soul every single day. I'm going to take it, and that sounds twisted, right?
Yeah, it does,
But
but
I
I love
created
it.
the necessity, and I know that I brought out the best in him and he brought out the best in me. He didn't need to know about it. We're still the best of friends, you know. And
He didn't need to know about it that I was
he
going to take
didn't. It
his
was
soul.
inside me. It was my
Right.
world in here, you
Yeah.
know.
I got you.
And you definitely didn't need to know that.
Uh,
And but you know, then I find out, you know, one of the clips, because I use a lot of clips and you know in the work that I do now. So I say these things, but then hey, let's hear Michael Jordan say this. So Michael Jordan in his speech after the Hall of Fame, he talks about all of these internal rivals that he created, and he calls them
yeah.
dots on a board. I'm like, oh my gosh, I did the same thing. But no one told me to do that. I did it out of necessity because I knew I needed to have this just twisted level of commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And I did all kinds of weird stuff, but it was about how do I get this thing to go no matter what. And so,
Is it manufactured adversity to some extent? Because I know Jordan was famous for that, and he got there was a lot of attention paid to his Hall of Fame speech for that very reason. He started kind of like
well,
bad mouthing people, like his high school coach and all this stuff, right? Because he wasn't. No one was saying anything bad about him as a player. Everybody
yeah.
bet on him. Everybody assumed he was going to win. He was the odds-on favorite to win MVP. Blah blah blah. So was it that kind of thing where you're creating adversity and sort of these naysayers in order to fuel you, or was it different for you?
Different versions of that, you know. I mean, he did dots on the board, but he never told these people, you know. In that speech, he had them in the audience, and they were all finding out for the first time, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
because he wasn't on the cover of Sports Illustrated with the rest of the team, even though he took the game-winning shot. Right?
yeah,
He used that as motivation. The coach that had cut him in high school, you know, and that player was in the audience. But you know, Kobe did the same thing. Kobe was there. There was a magazine where they rank all the best players in high school, and he was like 47, 48, and he created what he called his kill list, his assassin list. And so he said every single you know game was to take each one of these guys out systematically. Now
uh-huh.
that sounds twisted, but no one knew about that. Not
Yeah,
while he was playing. You just create this internal world that's very focused and driven on results. But the results were always moving. So the reason why I want to get back to the results is I never wanted a result to be connected to how I felt about my progress, if that makes any sense, because I want to be
yeah,
able to move quicker than the results. So what
right.
I did is um, I give names to it now just so I can reference it quick. Leapfrogging, I call it mental leapfrogging. So at the end of the season, you would drop a lot of time. That's the way swimming is. You do a lot of different things. You rest, you shave, you do all these things. And then you get this time that's a lot faster than anything else you did the rest of the season. So you could have a bad start, you could have a bad turn, and sometimes it didn't represent how fast you really were. And that was my perspective. And so what I would do is I would have this time, and I'm still learning how to do this thing, but I did it throughout my career. And I'd say, okay, well, if I had a great start, great turn, what's my base speed? And if I remove all the imperfections, what do you think is a fair time? And it was always faster. And then I'd say, okay, that's my time. I'm going to remove all of the evidence of the real time. And you know, self-development, if you lie enough to yourself, you believe it, changes
Yeah,
your identity eventually. And then that becomes my real time. And then I become humans are wired to be unsatisfied, right? That's what keeps evolution moving along. So then I would accept this new time, and then I'd go, I want to go, I'd say, set my new goals based on going faster than that new time. And I had teammates that would say, Seth, you can't keep dropping 2 seconds every single season. That's unheard of. I'd say, why not? You know, I'm the one that decides that.
yeah,
So, yes, the results were part of it, but were they real results? They were, a lot of them were made up results to just leverage me forward into this reality that was, you know, going at light speed. So,
yeah. You think about the guys that were, the guy that was in Kobe's year in high school that was ranked number one, right? He didn't
yeah,
have that. He didn't have to worry about leapfrogging people to get all the prestige and the attention, right? So there are people that, like, I'm thinking about your teammates saying you can't do that. If you set a goal that it's a time, right, or if it's a gold medal or whatever it might be, a promotion, and you get it, then what? Right? Then you're like, I guess I'm done. I guess I
Yeah.
retire now. Like, so, and you see people that do that all the time. They win, and then there's like this almost mourning period after they celebrate it, and then that fades away, and then like there's this death, this mourning of like, well, I don't have anything else to do now. I've reached the mountaintop. Like, oh man, it's kind
Yeah.
of a sad thing to think about in those terms.
Yeah. I mean, I try to do that with people now, and I'll say, okay, you know, let's say it's baseball, you win the World Series. Now let's just say hypothetically, I'll go get you the trophy. I'll go get you the money that you might get from endorsements and contract, and then we'll go hire a PR firm, and we'll get you the exposure. You get all the followers online, and within a very short period of time, you're going to be not just unsatisfied. You might be depressed, or you might be angry. Why? Because I stole the journey. The journey is the
Right.
thing that's feeding you.
Yeah.
It's not the actual thing, because if you win once, you want to win twice, you know? And if you win 10 times, you want to win 11 times. It is not fulfilling. What you go through is the thing that feeds your heart and soul.
Yeah,
In
I think that's the key to being, just being invested in something that's larger than yourself. You don't, that never gets taken away from you. Independent of results. To your point, you're never pick your, the most accomplished athlete on the planet at whatever period of time you want to use as the example. I promise that person, when they were all done and they never did their event or their sport again, they weren't like, okay, I'm satisfied. Right? Like, they always were striving for that one more. And some of them have the awareness where they're like, yeah, I want to win, but I also don't take the same passion or joy out of the journey anymore. And I know that I need to do that in order to get back there. Right. And that's gets back to your point about the journey being like, that's where the good stuff happens. Like, that's when no
Yeah.
one is paying attention. That's when you're actually getting better. And then they just kind of,
Yeah.
all of a sudden Seth's a good swimmer. Like, how did this happen?
Yeah. Yeah. I always pose that question with people as, what if right now, when you're going through the minor leagues, this is the happiest you'll ever be in your career? Like right now. Okay. That's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I try to get people interested in, let's create a lifestyle versus an accomplishment.
Yeah.
You know, I work with all different sports now, and so PGA players, and there's a story on PGA of David Duval, who his life goal was to be number one in the world and to win the British Open, and he won the British Open, and subsequently he was number one in the world, and so he achieved everything. And like people close to me in that sport said he was out of the sport within 3.5 years, because a lot of things, you're empty if that's all it
Yeah.
was, and you achieve it. And then it also can become a weight around your neck, because everything's in comparison to that thing.
Right. Well, and if it's anchored to a specific achievement, your self-worth, your identity gets wrapped up in that. Now I'm a British Open champion and number one player in the world, so I have to behave differently, right? There's more expectations on me. I can't finish fifth in this next tournament. I have to win it, and like, so that's, and especially in a sport like golf, and where it's so mental, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing. I've never been a golf. I live in a place where golf is huge, so I pay a little bit more attention to it now, but I can just really appreciate just sitting there watching them get ready to hit a shot. I'm like, man, the things that would be going through my head right now, right, in this situation. And how do you control those demons? No different than, throwing a pitch in the bottom of the ninth of the game in the line. It's like, you've got to find that flow state where it's just, okay, here we go.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. To me, that's what it's all about, is like you brought up, the flow state, you know, when I experienced the flow state for the first time, so I'll jump ahead in the trajectory of the career. I um, eventually won the state championship. I went to the University of Arizona, and second year I'm going against the Olympic gold medalist. I'm beating him the whole race until the final stroke. So within 6 years of being this kind of curious, crazy kid, I had gone to the top. And eventually I became a two-time national champion with the fastest split ever recorded. So, you know,
That's within six years of learning how to swim.
yeah, it was my second year in college. Was
So when do you? I think you told me this before. You started calling coaches and letting them know like this is what I can do.
Yeah,
'Cause they
yeah.
probably never heard of you, right?
No one. Yeah, yeah. So everything to me has always been this creation process from those books that my dad had me reading. And so is always this, think it, speak it, do it, right? Your thoughts become your words, become your actions. And so when I tell these, stories of the past, I always try to say, okay, I walked up to the head coach and I spoke what was in my mind, which was super clear. So I spoke my truth. And if he wouldn't have been okay with that and rejected me, I just would have talked to someone else until it
Yeah.
connected,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what I try to work with, people on, is get clear on your thoughts, and then your words will follow and your actions follow. So, yeah, I won the state championship, and then I was like, okay, spreadsheet again. Where do I want to go? And so my events, I looked at top 20 schools and put together a whole game plan. And it was, I'm going to put a press packet together, and it's going to have a cover sheet, and I'm going to tell my story, my mission statement. Hey, I've only been swimming for 4 years, and I look at what I've done in this short period of time, and really respect your program, and just think what we could do together, and then I'd have some, anything and everything, some clippings and stuff in this packet, and I'd send it out.
What was the feedback to that? How many people, like percentage wise, were like interested in? Because I'm thinking about it from my former life. You find some kid that's like, the best at what he does, and he hasn't been doing it that long. That's super intriguing, and you want to pursue that. But I'm guessing some people were kind of like, you're not on the circuit quite yet, sort of deal. What was the response?
Well, surprisingly, it was really good.
Okay.
I got all, back then we could only have 5 recruiting trips max. And so I got
Yeah.
all 5, and, I got a good response.
Okay.
So yeah, I did. I'm not saying that there were some that, the programs that were probably more like looking for kids that were on the radar,
Mm-hmm.
but I was looking for a coach that reminded me of my father, honestly,
Okay.
because I would go to these different recruiting trips, and I was really like, oh, they try to wine and dine you, and you go party and all this sort of stuff. I didn't care about that stuff. I didn't really care about the facilities too much. They were all good enough, but I really was about my connection to, who was going to be kind of like my father figure in a way.
Right.
That's the way I looked at the coach.
Yeah.
And I tell you, it's so weird, but it was just pure instinct of, I don't care about the coach, like his qualifications. All I care is he going to mess with my ideas? Because my dad didn't mess with my ideas, and I want a coach that won't mess with my ideas, because I knew the power was in the idea.
Yeah, you'd already proven
And
it to
that's so
yourself, right?
crazy, but that's my
Yeah.
perspective.
Well, it wasn't at that point. You'd sort of proven it to yourself. It wasn't. You weren't 14 now and hadn't done it yet. You'd done it to a degree. So I get it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's this guy, and it's Frank Bush, and he just reminded me of my dad, and I could trust him immediately. And
Yeah.
so he made us not as big an offer as the other schools, but I wanted to be, back then, the PAC conference, Pacific Conference. Most of the Olympians were coming out of there. So again, it was always resistance, right?
Yeah.
You want to find out like what the rest of the world is doing. I don't want to be the big fish in a big pond. What's the point of that? I don't need to be the big guy. And
Mm-hmm.
so I went to a school that would put me in the situation where I'd be going up against the best because I wanted to be tested. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yep.
And so I remember we were going against USC the very first meet, and I went my best time. So it would have won state the year before, and just two schools, 8 swimmers, and I was dead last. And I was like, yes, this is
Wow.
awesome. See, it wasn't about the result or,
Yeah.
the standings
Yeah.
or any of that stuff. It was like, I just want to know what everybody else is doing because I know, well, first of all, I want to be challenged. And if I can't live up to this, then what's the point, So
Uh-huh.
I really wanted to go up against these people. And immediately I was turned on by like, I beat these guys, I can beat anyone.
Yeah.
And that was exciting. But,
That's great.
slowly.
It's like that would deflate most people, right? That would have been my best time ever. And I just finished dead, dead last.
Yeah, but to me, it was always this, it always came from a curiosity,
Yeah.
and I used to do this back even in Oregon at the program. I would go, back then it was all magazines. So I'd go cut out all of these results from around the world and I'd hang them up on the wall in the locker room. And I'd say, guys, we don't focus on the people here. We focus on the people out there. Don't think local, think global. I used to say that, right? Like,
Yeah.
those are the guys we want to compete against, these guys in the magazines.
Uh-huh.
No one got it.
Were
But
you
then,
a little bit of a how were you received by your teammates? Were you kind of an outsider? Did they welcome you with open arms? Because you're clearly so invested in this unique mindset and the power of it and committed to it and not going to bend from that. And I can't imagine everybody was like, cool, I'm on board with that. Right. Like how did that go over with teammates?
well, I was pretty quiet to really be transparent that, my mom called me the silent steamroller. So I kind of created the locker room as like, okay, this is what I'm doing in my bedroom. I got pictures of people up on my wall. I got goals on my wall. So I'm just going to create an environment. And if they like it, fine. If they don't like it, then, no harm.
Yeah.
So I was pretty quiet about it. But yeah, I mean, if someone asked me, some of my close friends, I would tell them. But I also guarded these ideas. I knew that I was they were like, you're kind of incubating these ideas,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I coach people on now. Is that just like the movie Rudy, which is Kobe Bryant's favorite movie, but it's a real life story of someone wanted to not having good grades, wanting to go to Notre Dame, play football, like small guy, all those things,
Mm-hmm.
all the resistance. And the character I always focus on is his older brother who's working the factory, who's the cynic saying, hey, get back to work. Why are you doing all this
Mm-hmm.
foolish stuff, chasing your
Yeah.
dreams?
Yeah.
And I always say people project their internal world on the outside world. So he's from a place of limiting beliefs. And so you are a challenge to him. So I kind of got used to being a challenge to people. My existence would make them feel uneasy,
Mm-hmm.
and you'd have people spit their poison, which is their self doubt onto you. And if you take that on board, that could kill a career. But what's interesting in being able to help people get to the highest level, I helped a guy get into the NBA, and I said, this is what's going to happen. All those cynics, the moment you make it, they're going to come to you and they're going to look you in the eye and say, I always knew you could do it. And you're going to go,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Right.
But the point to that is that they never saw you in the first place. They saw themselves. And so when you're going after your dreams, they were speaking to you, but they were really talking to themselves saying, how dare you go after your dreams? Because I'm not going to allow myself to go after my dreams.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they have amnesia. They have psychological amnesia. And then they want, I would say they'll be the first to ask for a ticket on your bandwagon. Right.
Yeah.
They'll forget all of
Yeah.
it.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a great point. It's a great point. So you obviously didn't let that noise get to you, right? You were singularly focused on that. And you get through. Well, tell me a little bit more about college. So you said your was it your first meet or your second meet? Oh no, you said sophomore year. You go up
Yeah.
against the gold medal one, right?
Yeah. So I go up against him and, beating him the whole race, like I said. But my coach was really interesting. I had another coach. So one was the head coach, was Frank, and then uh, Rick Rick DeMont Rocket was my specialty coach. So I was a sprinter, and Rick was a world record holder, and so he was a guy that had actually been to battle, a fellow warrior, and so he spoke these simple truths, and that's what I do now is that I've been to battle, I've been to the top of the mountain. And so I speak from this experience, being able to get you ready for a very simple approach because you need things to be super simple in battle.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got second, and I'm feeling like this is awesome, this is great. And he was really supportive and nice, but he'd say these little things that at the time I didn't understand. And he'd say, you know, why are you apologizing for your greatness? I'd be like, what? What is he talking about? I'm just. Did you see that race? That guy was on TV. He won the gold medal. He could see something else. And so the second year I did, my junior year, I did it again. Same guy, same scenario. And he'd say, why are you asking for permission? I was like, what the hell is he talking about? And so my final year, senior year, I'm, standing behind the blocks and something happened to me. It was like, I look at it now and it was just like, your back's against the wall and you just become primal. And my aunt had never seen me compete, and she's from New York City, and she'd never been to a swim meet. And she said, just the way you stood there, I knew you'd already won the race before it even started. And what was going on in the inside was, are you allowed? Is it okay to cuss?
Yeah, have at
I can do that. Okay.
it.
So the unedited version was I stood there and I just this peace came over me and I said, fuck this race, fuck these people, I'm fucking taking this. And I still get the chills every time I tell the
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
Totally
I
or
bet.
and you drop into the flow state, the zone, the moment, being present. And it was, now I understand what happened, but back then I couldn't remember anything that had happened. But I dove in and I was going faster than I had ever gone before, which, I was missing all the turns because you time your turns, and so I was coming to almost a dead stop, kicking into each one of these turns, and I still missed the American record by 2 inches.
Wow.
And I won by over a body length, the national championship. Um, the Olympic coach came over to me and said, that's the fastest I'd ever seen a human being, move through the water. All these things. And it was, now I just call it the fuck it switch, which is, I understand it now, which is when you watch Star Wars and, he's trying to, in the first one that was released back in the day, he's trying to blow up the Death Star and he can hear Obi-Wan in his mind saying, trust the force. That was based
Yep.
on mythology, which is
Yep.
allow the life force to flow through you,
Yeah.
and so we can, I meet people where they're at. So if it's a person of faith, it's allow God to flow through you, spirit, or it could just be thinking about the team first, right? Team first mindset, that it's not about you, it happens
Mhm.
through you. And then you get this like superpower, right? And so with that experience, all of a sudden it just rocked my world. And so that's what I try to get across to people is this next level. It was like being in a race car and racing and doing really, really well, but not even knowing that there was this like turbo gear.
Right. Just push this button, see what happens.
Yeah, because when it's a strange like sort of paradox of opposites where you train and train and train and you get all the way to this sort of launching pad, and then to really take off you have to let go. But your ego doesn't want to do that. Your ego is like, wait, no, this is about us. These
Yeah.
are moments.
Yeah.
And so, being able to speak from experience has helped to say, no, this is what it's about. You got to let it go. And,
Yeah.
and that's been exciting to help people to reach that level.
So I imagine, I mean, I know you work with a lot of athletes, and that my bias showing, but I feel like it's probably a little bit easier and maybe a little bit more linear for athletes to understand that concept, even if they haven't maybe experienced it themselves yet. They've competed against people who they're like, this guy just had a look in his eye, and I had no shot, right? Whatever it was. Have you found that folks in other walks of life, is there a difference between how that's received? Do people, sort of perceive it a little bit differently if they don't have an athletic background, or they're just in the business world? Does that land with them?
It does. With like, if you looked at the research on flow state, he studied everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Csikszentmihalyi. I
Yep.
think I might have got his name right
I think you
there.
got it right. Yeah.
Um, and what he did is he did real time pagers back in the day, and he was able to find that factory workers would get into flow state, mothers would get into flow state when they're reading to their children, children get in. Children are naturally in the flow state,
Yeah.
right? We're
Yeah.
constantly in the flow state until we're 8. And so everyone's experienced the flow state. So yeah, you can talk to business people, creatives. I work with people that are fashion designers or film directors, or everyone has that extra gear, the fuck it switch, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's just a matter of kind of trusting it and getting into the, I always like to say it's like surfing a wave. So the big wave surfers, they get into the flow state, and it's a matter of like self-preservation. It's a matter of survival, because if they
Yeah.
crash, they could die,
Right.
right?
Right.
So the interesting part about the flow state is that it happens when you're really uncomfortable at first. So the wave has to be big enough to create this oh shit sort of feeling, like oh shit, this
Yeah.
is a big wave. And then when you drop in and you're able to let go, right? You find yourself doing things both in your body, but also you have an awareness outside your body in time changes, and you do the right thing at the right time. You might have never done this before, but it just feels right. And so in order to get into that is very uncomfortable. But then once you're in it, it feels like, well, as they say, Joseph Campbell, who was, he helped George Lucas with Star Wars, with, to Luke Skywalker, the Force. He,
Mm-hmm.
he, he also is the one that coined, follow your bliss. But the part of the quote that I found out later that was left out of the popular culture is he meant to say, follow your blisters to find the bliss, right? So, of
Okay.
course, we edited out the part that's uncomfortable and just like, hey,
Yeah.
just go follow your bliss,
Yeah.
go
Just be
bliss
happy.
out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a great point. I think that about getting into the flow state, it's the waves are a great analogy, because it has to be whatever it is that you're confronted with has to be almost beyond what you've ever done before, because otherwise you're just going to revert back to your training, right? I've competed against people who have done this before. I've encountered that before. I've played in games where the weather's been like this. It's more, I guess, tactical or technical at that point. It's when it exceeds that, it just, you kind of like overload your system, that primal instinct kicks in, and it is survival. And that's when you can see it. Like, it is so cool to see in real time. You're like, did you see that switch go off? And you're like, oh, everybody watch, just stand back and see what happens here. But
And the
it's,
beautiful part about it is, when I was younger, a mentor said to me, "You're going to be a preacher someday." And I remember thinking, well, we went to church, but it wasn't like a main focus, and I wasn't studying the Bible, so I really didn't see this being something that would, you know, I couldn't see that happening right away. But
yeah,
what I realized is that with what I do now, it's a form of that, right?
sure.
It's preaching performance, if you will, because it's beautiful how your optimal performance is protected from the ego. That in order for you to be the best at what you do, your best self, is that it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
You got to let go of that,
Right.
right? There's got to be something bigger than you. And that's what I think is beautiful about this whole thing is, helping people to let go, right? And allow something to take over and to be both the participant, but also the observer at the same time.
Yeah, that the faith thing resonates with me because whether you're a person of faith or not, um, the idea of just believing in something larger than yourself and knowing that, like you said earlier, it flows through you. It's not about you. It's really hard to shed that ego, and the only way you can, and faith is maybe the best, most effective, most common sort of mechanism in which that is utilized. But if you don't, you think about people that maybe don't believe in God or aren't people of faith, and that that seems to me like it would be a bigger challenge to then find something that you would believe in that is greater than yourself. Maybe it's nature. You use the surfing analogy, right? You just the ocean's undefeated. You're never gonna beat it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to it has to sort of exceed the ego, right? Because the ego can manage it. Get to my earlier point, up until like your training and your talent, wherever that threshold
Yeah.
is, and then when you bust through that ceiling, that's when the ego's like, "Whoa, I gotta,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do here."
Well, your mind, again, I use like just simple, practical ways of describing things. So your mind is here to keep you safe, and it has good intentions, but it doesn't know you're out on a baseball field. All it does is feel the sensation of, man, we really care about this, right? This
Yeah,
feels like life or death.
yeah,
And so what it starts to do is it runs scenarios because the mind is trying to guess what's going to happen next, right? For self-preservation. So it's trying to figure out, is this good or bad? Is it good is we're going to go be the hunter. We're going to be in the flow state. We're going to be at our best. Or is this going to be bad? Are we going to die? Do we need to run and hide? Are we going to be the hunted? And it runs these things simultaneously almost. And that's where you kind of, all the great performers kind of learn that they have to ride with it,
mm-hmm.
that it's just naturally going, your mind is going to mess with you. And so what you're trying to do is accept it, that that's its role, and just put yourself in the best position to be able to surf that wave. And so when you really do think of team first, you think of God, or something bigger, then it allows something to let go, let go and let God. Or, and I try to meet people where their belief comes. So it's faith, belief and trust. Those are the things that are going to really take your performance to the next level. So if it is a person of faith, we'll talk about God. If it's a person of spirit, spirit. If it's a person that doesn't talk about any of that, we're really trying to find some level of fatalism, maybe, where it's kind of, you could use astrology, you could use karma, where you're just like written in the stars, but something to help you to let go.
Yeah,
But if we have to go all the way to the science side of it, I would say, okay, when you get in the car and you drive to the store, okay, you just make the decision that you're going to go to the store. And do you have any thoughts along the way? No, and sometimes you may even pick up the phone and have a call on the way. So you're doing something that's very different. It's dangerous and
yeah,
it's also chaotic. You don't know what traffic's going to be like, but you do it without even thinking about it, and you also multitask it, right? So that's a version of this. So I'll say, okay, so your subconscious mind and your muscle memory can drive a car, right? And so you've been playing baseball or you've been hitting this golf ball or whatever it is, much longer than you've been driving a car. So see ball, hit ball, or let the car drive itself. Just trying to find a way for them to be able to let go.
mm-hmm.
And that's really scary for the ego because the ego is going, wait, I want control over this.
Yeah. I mean, I love the driving analogy because it's like if you start breaking it down into what it is and how we go about doing it. I mean, if you and I are driving in opposite directions on a 2-lane highway going 60 miles an hour, and all that separates us is like a 6-inch yellow line, and we're 4 feet away from each other, like if you describe it like that and you kind of look at it like a science, you're like, that is insane. I'm not going to do that. And then meanwhile, you do it without even thinking about it while you're on the phone and you're eating a sandwich or whatever you're doing, but it's
Yeah.
spot on because it's muscle memory and it's sort of been normalized. And then I think that's the trick, right? Is the really, really great ones are able to sort of normalize that pressure, and it's they still feel it, but to your
Yep.
point, it's almost like they feel the flutter of the heartbeat or whatever it might be, and it's like they got a manual stick shift and they just shift gears and it just
Yeah.
quiets down, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so what we focus on are the things that you have control over. So you have control over perspective, like the picture frame you put around it. And so Michael Jordan never said pressure feels good, but he always said these really like activating waves of pressure where he'd put a picture or positive picture frame around it saying, man, I do well under pressure. The more pressure, the better, you know?
Yeah.
But he never said feels comfortable, or feels pleasant, because it doesn't. So what we have to do is we have to change our relationship to pressure. That's this discomfort.
Mhm.
In a good simple way of seeing an example of this is, you let's say you're training and you go to this building and it has heavy objects in it, and you go in there and you lift them and it makes your body ache. It makes your muscles ache, right? Now, that doesn't, I describe it that way, it has no purpose. It sounds like torture. But we've grown used to the purpose of being able to frame this thing and go, no, when you go do that and you keep doing it, you're actually training the muscle, you're breaking it down, you'll come back stronger. And that's just weightlifting, right? So I try to take that perspective and say, why can't we look at pressure the same way? Because it's
Mhm.
not going to feel comfortable. Lifting a weight's never, I hope it never feels comfortable. Then you're not really doing it right.
Well, it's the same. It's the same thing. That's where growth comes from, right? And from the athlete's perspective, if there's no pressure on you, you're probably in fourth place. Like you're probably not winning. And like because there is everybody that's ever won anything or finished second. There's
Yeah.
there's pressure on that, and that's not just sports; it's anything, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it's you embrace the pressure, you seek it out sometimes, right? The manufactured adversity, whatever it may be, but it's they view it, to your point, they view the pressure differently. They don't view it as this obstacle; they view it almost as a fuel.
Yeah. And you look forward to it because all the pressure is showing you is that you care about it. Right.
Right, right.
And so if you didn't care about it, there wouldn't be any pressure. And the better you get at handling pressure, the things that you care about, could be asking someone out on a date, it could be taking a test, giving a speech, or going out into the World Series, bottom of the ninth, everything's on your shoulders, you know, it's all pressure. So
Hmm.
what's your relationship to pressure? And the more clear you get on it, the more you lean into it and you understand it and you want more of it, the more life hands you bigger opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. I think that I don't know what the percentage is, but there's a lot of people that are confronted with that for the first time. Use public speaking as a great example, right? It's the number one fear in the world, or nobody wants to speak in front of people. And if they get up there and they flub their words and they just completely crash and burn, I'm sure a lot of people never, ever, ever do it again. Right? They're just like,
Yeah.
no way. Right. But if they had tried again a second time and it went well, where they just felt a little bit better about it, the high you get from doing that kind of thing, of like overcoming that, is monumental. And there are people that probably are capable, not probably, certainly capable of incredible things if they can just get through that pressure crucible. And some people do it easier than others, but a lot of people just hit the wall once and they're like, okay, that's enough for me. That hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you get in a pressure situation, it really does almost feel like a battlefield sort of environment where bullets are flying, right? And you may have had all these things that you were going to do, and then your mind becomes unpredictable. And then what? So what
Hmm.
we try to do is we try to have things worked out ahead of time and super simple, and then also have some visuals so that we can remind ourselves that, when the bullets start flying, we don't know where our mind's going to be. So we need to be able to look at the glove and say, oh, okay, that's what we're focused on. You
Hmm.
know, this is what I have control over in this environment. And
Yeah,
that's so
exactly.
simple. But, again, it's like your palm in front of your face, you got to pull it back and go, oh, that's my palm. And that's the space that I work in is like, power hides in the obvious. It's these simple, simple things, but you use them as a tool when it really matters under pressure. It becomes really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a matter of, I guess, focusing on, to your point, what you can't control if people are heckling you or if there's $1 million in the line or whatever it is, but you can control how you behave in that environment, what techniques you use, and
Yeah, there's
where
all
you allow
kinds
your
of.
head to go.
Yeah, I mean, you have, some of the main controllables are your breathing. You know, you can control your breath, so you can take a reset breath, a big huge breath, just to like let go of everything. Or you could do a breathing pattern like the box breathing from the Navy SEALs.
Hmm.
And the counting is a thing that will occupy your mind as you're moving through this pressure moment and give you a small sense of control. Your body language, like Steph Curry will do intentional smiling at the free throw line if he's in a rut, because he
Yep.
says attitude manifests results. So these little things, are part of this process of getting the control back. Where you put your shoulders, how you have your chest back, will make it so that you feel more confident. Um, how you talk to yourself. You're the most trusted voice, that you'll ever experience in your entire life. Where is that conversation leading your thoughts, your identity eventually? And then perspective. How are you looking at this whole thing? Because if it doesn't look perfect, your mind will race to a result and it will start to spiral out of control because, oh, well, this feels really uncomfortable. Let's go try this.
Yeah.
And then, oh, well, let's go try this. And then you see people in athletics, especially because it's, metric based, so it's easier to see. And it's on TV too, where they start to speed up their tempo and it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it's a matter of like, where do we put our focus? How do we stay, you know, in our own little bubble and, be able to have a sense of control over the little things, not the big things. Your ego is going to want to always go to the big things, the story.
Yep.
We have to be able to go to the small little things that will
Yeah.
eventually lead to those stories.
Right. And it's the difference, I think, between, because you're right, your ego is going to seek out comfort. And
Yep.
so sometimes that comfort is, this path is too hard, I'm going to take another path because that's just a little bit easier. But
Yep.
sometimes if you can sort of silence that voice and say, this is uncomfortable, so I'm going to like look inward and I'm going to go really like 3 layers below and focus on my breathing, then all of a
Yep.
sudden that part's more comfortable and all this other stuff's still going on, I'm just not focused on it. So that's a big delta, right? You're fast forwarding through it just to get it over with. You're essentially self-sabotaging, right? Like, I'm not going to win this, so let's get it over as fast as we can, versus let me
Yeah.
let me kind of put it on autopilot to a certain extent and see how good we can do.
Yeah, yeah. Your ego is always going to be like trying to control the outcome, trying to control the outcome. And so like in baseball, a good example would be, working with major league pitchers and asking them, because I'm always interested in, patterns. And I ask very simple questions. So I'm always coming from this beginner's mindset. And so I'll say, okay, when you're in the bullpen and you can't hit the broadside of the barn, you can't find the strike zone, what are those games like? They say, oh, those are the special games.
Yeah.
What? Interesting. So when you don't have control and then you just go out and do, that's when something special happens? And I like to bring that and hold that right in front of us and say, okay, why do you think that happens? Because I have examples of that on the PGA Tour. They have a saying, beware of the sick or injured player, because they'll play out of their mind because they're more focused in the disturbance of
Right.
being sick or injured.
Right.
Um, And I have all these different people working with Formula One drivers, or that have stories of winning Monaco when they were sick as a dog. They were miserable, didn't even want to be there, but they just went out and drove, and they drove out of their minds, and they won the biggest race there is. And so it's interesting to work with people of the highest level, and you think it's going to be focused on being the best, perfection, all that sort of stuff. And it's imperfections. It's the opposite. It's when things are so ugly and messy that they just let go. And that's the fuck it switch, because the day before, because we had multiple days at nationals, the day before was my worst day of competition ever. It was so bad with the sabotage. It was crazy that day because I was so focused on getting it right. And then it just blew up in my face. So then the second day came around, and that's where the fuck it switch was. I just finally let it go. And you watch people like John Rahm famously four-putted the first hole of the Masters, and then he went on to win the Masters, right? So we have an early imperfection that sets us free, and the ego just goes, okay, this is over. I'll just let you go do it. I'll just let you drive the car.
Yeah. Well, there's a little bit of like anger in that sometimes, right? Like they're kind of pissed off at themselves or the results, and they're like, well, screw it, right? Like I'm not, and that's kind of freeing, because then you're focused on like almost the anger is the motivator. You can take that too far. Anger can turn into rage, but I've seen that like a million times.
Yeah. It's finding this balance, and I love the fact that it's beyond the ego, right? Because it really brings you back to, there has to be something bigger than you in this. And that's the beautiful part about it, all of this.
Yeah, that's why I always go back to the golf's the perfect example. There's parallels between that and baseball, but it's like in golf, you're in the tee box. It's just you. Nobody can help. Nobody else can help you. Nobody else can do anything for you. And really, it's almost entirely up to you. There's some weather conditions, I suppose, and some other things that can impact you. But if everything's right and you hit it good, it's probably gonna be a pretty good shot, right? But then you look at the other side of that of baseball, and I had this conversation with my 7-year-old son the other day, because he's doing baseball and he's doing golf, and we were golfing, and he just shanked one, right? He just hit it straight right. I go, hey buddy, it's golf. Like, it's gonna happen. You're gonna hit some bad shots sometimes. I go, with baseball, the same thing can happen. You can hit the ball right on the screws, line drive right at somebody, they catch it. You can't hit it any better. Like, you can't worry about that. And he's like, yeah, whatever, Dad. And then sure as hell, his next, like 2 days later, he had a baseball game, line drive right back of the pitcher. The kid's like, boop, got it. And he just looks at me. He's like, you gotta be kidding me. I told you this is going to happen. You're just going to be okay with it. But it's liberating. Like, it's in a lot of ways. When I played in college, it was kind of hot headed and had sort of a football player's mentality in baseball, which is not helpful. So I would make a mistake, or somebody would make a great play against the ball that I hit or whatever, and I'd be all upset and angry about it. And I've matured and realized, like, it's kind of the beauty of it. Like, the beauty of the universe and the beauty of the sport is like this. It's not randomness, but it's just the things that you can't control. You do your best, you control your controllables, and then, let go and let God, right? And just kind of embrace that.
Yeah. And to that point, I mean, when I was done with my sport, I started having panic attacks, like debilitating panic attacks. And so I embraced it. Everything is, there's nothing broken. You just got to learn about it, right? Another project. And so panic attack is trying to control the outcome. And so the blessing of going into that is, the lesson on the other side of it is that the only control you have is by letting go of control. And so whether you're talking about panic attack or yips or whatever it might be, so much of everything we do is letting go, right? Of acceptance. So in golf, the beautiful part about golf is you can hit the perfect shot in the air or on the perfectly manicured green. There's still disturbances. There's still variables, right? Mm-hmm. So you can do it perfectly and it still won't go in, right? So there's a lot of acceptance in especially golf. Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful part about sports, is that in order for us to be at our best, we have to find a way to let go, when it's most uncomfortable.
Right. When you want to let go the least.
Exactly.
When you want to hold down the tightest, that's when you need to let go. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's when you sit there talking about the yips and all. I haven't thought about this movie in years, but I think it's Major League 2, and the catcher's got the yips. He can't throw the ball back to the pitcher, and they find out that he starts reading like I don't know if it's Playboy or if it's like the lingerie, magazine or something, and he starts reciting like the descriptions of the bra and underwear. And he's saying it, and all of a sudden, right, he just starts throwing the ball back to the pitcher perfect. And it's like, It's goofy and it's funny, but it's like, there's real like power to that, right? All of a sudden he's distracted and it's boom, we're okay again. We're back to what we do.
Yeah. Just letting the car drive.
Yeah.
You don't have to think about driving the car. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's amazing, the mind, and of all the different personality types. So I asked my coach, he in charge of all of Michael Phelps' 5 Olympics. So he'd been around the best of the best. And I asked him, what's the personality type that's the most successful? And he said, there's not one kind, but they're all extremes. So extreme introvert, extreme extrovert. And so what I've taken that is one step further, is the extreme that he's talking about is stubborn, right? So the greats are stubborn. So we can stubbornly work against ourselves, and then we can also learn about this and stubbornly work for ourselves, right? And that's what we're trying to instill in all of this.
And that's primarily a matter of perspective, right? Because you're still stubborn. It's just a matter of which direction you're pushing.
Exactly.
Yeah. I always try to find that stuff, right? Like the elite performers in any walk of life. And what do you're sitting in a room with, the top 50 Major League Baseball players or film producers or chefs or swimmers, like pay attention. Cause that's like, there's just so much to glean from that. Just the little off ball minutia stuff where how are they interacting with each other? What are they doing? What time do they show up? And you can, if you look, you can kind of see through the matrix, you can kind of see those common threads. And it's fun because they all do it with their own like little flavor. That's what makes it so fun. If we all did it the same way, it'd be boring. Right. But, everybody's personality showing through.
And that's what I love. I'm obsessed about what I do now, is that I believe there's a pattern of greatness. I think I just call it the blueprint of greatness. And when you cross-reference all the people that have been successful in all walks of life, they're all doing similar things, similar patterns. They're doing their version of it, but it's a similarity between. So, and for me, my curiosity is meeting them where they're at to understand, how are you coming at this, and then show you the pattern and see how to unlock that.
That brings us full circle. That sounds like kind of the approach your parents took with you as a kid. It's like you're looking to learn from them so you can then help them, right? Like if more people, I think, would embrace that, I think we'd have a kinder, gentler world first and foremost. But I think there's just a lot I've really always enjoyed being around people and working with people that are, that embrace that. Like the CEO that's going to walk down and talk to the janitor and not do it because he knows everybody's paying attention and he wants to be the everyman. I mean, he's doing it because he's like, hey, how's your kids? Like, what can we do better? Right? Like, there's good ideas come from everywhere. So why am I not going to ask? Everybody.
Exactly. And your world becomes your library.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So last question for you, and I'm curious about your answer on this one, given your experience and your perspective on things, but what makes a good teammate in your mind?
Good teammate. Good teammate to me is team first, willing to put their everything on the line, right? Good at listening, their version of listening. I think that's a good teammate. I mean, to me, I always think of battle. So who is, at the end of the day, who's willing to take a bullet?
Yeah.
And that's
who do you want in your foxhole?
Yeah. Cause I'll do it.
Right.
You're on my team. I'll take the bullet. And that's the kind of person I want next to me in the foxhole.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one. Seth, has been awesome, man. Tell everybody where they can find you. Is it, Your website?
Yeah, the easiest way is sethpepper.com website. Can reach out to, just to have a conversation. I always like talking with people. And then a lot of the social media, it's my name is the handle. So whether it's Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. So always
Awesome.
like sharing the obsession. So
Yeah, man.
please reach
Well, I
out.
appreciate you sharing some with me today. It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate your insights on things and your perspective. It's super unique, and I know you get a lot to offer. So thanks for spending some time today.
Thank you for this conversation and letting me in. This is a journey together. So thank
No
you.
doubt. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the No One Is Watching podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe to be notified of future episodes. If you'd like to support the show, please take a second, leave a rating and review, or share it with your friends. If you're interested in similar content, you can check out my website at nooneiswatching.com, where you can subscribe to the newsletter, read my blog, or follow me on your social media platform of choice. Look, your time is valuable, so thank you for lending me some.